As many would say, the taste of childhood. But not for me, since my family didn't make snow white cake when I was a kid. But today, we're making the most tender albaca zapada, as we call it in Romania, without powdered sugar on top. This recipe will yield a 20 by 30 centimeter tray, about 1.3 kilograms of cake. Hi, I'm Robert, and today we're making snow white cake, incredibly soft, with a silky lemon cream, and I'll show you at the end how to decorate it without powdered sugar, because I personally don't like it on anything. Let's get started right away with the lemon cream. For this, I've put 500 grams of milk in a small pot, along with 100 grams of sugar, and I warm it just enough to dissolve the sugar. Once the milk is warm, not too hot, just enough for the sugar to dissolve, I'll slowly pour it over 50 grams of cornstarch, mixing thoroughly, and then return it to the pot to cook. Cook over medium-high heat until it thickens, stirring continuously so it doesn't stick to the bottom. Once it has thickened, I add 200 grams of butter. Use cold butter and add it in stages to prevent the cream from splitting. If the butter melts too quickly, the cream won't incorporate it properly and might curdle. After the butter is fully incorporated, add 75 grams of lemon juice and 10 grams of lemon zest and mix well to combine. Be cautious if using store-bought lemons. Opt for organic or untreated lemons. I'm lucky to use untreated lemon zest in my lab. Transfer the cream to a bowl, cover it with cling film, touching directly the surface, and let it cool to room temperature. Don't refrigerate it, as it will cool too much and be harder to work with later. While the cream cools, we'll make the cake layers. This recipe will yield a 20 by 30 centimeter cake with 4 layers. In a stand mixer or with a hand mixer, combine 1.5 eggs or 1 egg and 1 egg yolk with 40 grams of sugar and whisk until fluffy. Next, add 30 grams of oil and 70 grams of milk, mixing again. Then, activate 5 grams of baking soda with a bit of lemon juice and add it. Finally, add 330 grams of flour all at once and mix with a spatula. Please stick to these measurements. I once heard the dough needed more flour, but that's not true. If you add too much flour, the layers will turn out tough and not as tender. I knead the dough lightly to fully integrate the flour, and since kneading develops some gluten, I let the dough rest for about 5 minutes under cling film, not touching the surface this time, to relax the gluten. Each layer will need about 135 grams of dough, but you can add a little extra since the excess will be trimmed and reused. Here's a technique I learned from a former employee: to use less or no flour when rolling out the layers. Cut parchment paper to the exact 20 by 30 centimeter size and roll the dough directly on the paper using a small rolling pin for better control. Trim the edges to fit perfectly, then place the parchment paper and dough directly on the back of a baking tray. This eliminates the need to dust your work surface with flour, which can dry out the dough. Bake each layer on the back of the tray for exactly 5 minutes at 175 Celsius, no fan. While one bakes, roll out the next layer. Don't overbake, after all it's called snow white, not something yellow. Once all the layers are baked and cooled, I like to place a light weight on them while cooling to keep them flat, and the cream has cooled, it is time to assemble the cake. Whip 100 grams of heavy cream to soft peaks, not too stiff, and use a whisk to loosen the cream slightly before folding in the whipped cream. This step ensures the cream is smoother and creamier. Choose the flattest, nicest layer for the top of the cake. Spread out 330 grams of cream on each layer, distributing it slightly thicker along the edges to prevent the middle from bulging. Press each subsequent layer firmly to ensure good contact with the cream, letting excess cream squeeze out from the sides. Smooth the sides once assembled. Refrigerate the cake for at least 8 hours to allow the cream to set and the layers to soften and the flavors to meld. I like to place a 1.5 or 2 kg weight on top of the cake during this time to ensure everything is compact and level giving perfectly even slices later. Now for the decoration. Instead of powdered sugar, I melt some white chocolate in a saucepan. No need to temper it. Tempered chocolate sets too quickly and becomes brittle, making slicing difficult. Pour a thin, even layer of melted chocolate over the cake, thick enough to cover but thin enough for easy cutting. Use a long knife to score the chocolate before it fully sets to mark your slices. For a final touch, use a parchment paper cone filled with white chocolate to decorate each slice as desired. Trim the edges of the cake, then cut it using a seared knife, sawing gently to avoid damaging the decoration. For more recipes like this, don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Instagram for plenty of useful tips.